Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And on this lovely Wednesday morning, we get to talk about what was the first day of mandatory minicamps or minicamp, as the case may be, for the Seahawks yesterday. Got some sound from Mike Macdonald and Laken Tomlinson, DK Metcalf, Boye Mafe. We'll go through that a little bit later, as well as some news on the day and some things that caught my attention. And thanks to everybody for all the birthday wishes yesterday. That was very nice of you, and felt the love, which was nice and appreciated. I proved the fact that I was an old man by spending most of the episode talking about it being my 80th episode yesterday of Hawk Blogger Mornings. And when I went to upload it, I realized it was my 79th. So if you needed any more evidence that I am an old man, it is that I can't count anymore. I think counting past 79 is not my in my capability list anymore. I also had some suggestions from folks that I should actually skip the year 49 because of the implications and the numerology with the 49ers. But what you don't know is that this is like an alignment of like a celestial alignment. This is the one year of my life that I get to control the fate of anything with 49 in its name. And so I actually am going to embrace this year. I have really dastardly plans for the 49ers this year, and I will reveal them to you as the season progresses, but it's going to be great. So I will take advantage of all that. Good morning to folks that I'm seeing. We've got Hawks fan Matt Man, our YouTube member extraordinaire, 67 plush, Swedish Shinobi. Good morning to all of you. Love seeing from Kane Muss here. My morning ritual. I'm so happy to be part of your day. Hopefully a good one. And hopefully you guys are enjoying getting to know each other as part of this, as we come together every morning to talk Seahawks. Good morning to Detail Oriented. I see you. Thank you. And good morning to especially all YouTube members and patron members. It is a double pod Wednesday. So not only do we have Hawk Blogger Mornings, which obviously is always fun, but this evening, 6 p.m. Pacific, we also have Real Hawk Talk. And so we have a guest joining tonight that I'm really excited to welcome aboard and speak with, Maura Dooley, who is a producer over at Seattle Sports Radio 710. She works on the Brock and Salk show. For my money, one of the smarter sports people in the area. And if you follow Maura, you know that. If you don't, you should. And so looking forward to the conversation with Maura this evening. And it turns out that Maura and I did the exact same hike within a week of each other. So that's something we'll have to catch up on. I had a little bit of a different experience, which I'll show you in a second, but looking forward to talking about that with her. Our most generous and consistent super chatter, Garth Knight, chimes in with a happy belated birthday. Have you consulted with a witch doctor in your 49er plans for this 49th year? I don't need a witch doctor, Garth. I am very comfortable with the amount of control that I'm going to exert over the 49ers this season. So appreciate the super chat as always and the support. Yeah, so I went on this hike yesterday, and I'll show you this hike. It's the Annette Lake Trail. It is gorgeous, but I ran into mountain goats. There's this guy, hopefully you can see him in the background with his backpack. He had 3 mountain goats. And when I tell you that when we walked around the corner and there was mountain goats, Finn had some thoughts about that. And this mountain goat, this is actually after we already passed them. And this one just turned around. I was like, "Hey," he's like standing on business here. He was gonna make sure we kept going. And I gotta say, I've never been that close to a mountain goat, and those horns, man, they're a little intimidating. They're big. They're big creatures, man. It was cool though. It was cool. It was fun. Um, and I'll show you a little bit. I think of this video should play if I can make it play. This is actually a gorgeous lake. It's about a 6.5 mile hike. You got a waterfall dropping off into the lake. Still snow up there at the peak, and it was a little bit of a windy, misty day, at least on the way up. It was sunny by the afternoon, but one of my favorite hikes I've done. So I'll have to, one of these episodes, I may just compile some of my favorite hikes and share with you all some of my favorites. But this one was a good one. I think ultimately it's about 7.25 miles and about 2,000 feet of elevation gain. So, moderate hike, nothing too crazy, and really enjoyed it. But that is not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about the first day of mandatory minicamp for the Seahawks and some news that came out of that today. And I will pause one more time before I get into the news of the day. Reminder that starting next Friday, the 21st, I will be on the road and will not be doing live versions of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I will be pre-recording just to keep the streak going and make sure you have new content every day. I'll be pre-recording episodes for a week while we're out. We're going to be actually on our way to Glacier and then up to Banff and Lake Louise and all that fun stuff with the family. So I will be focusing on having fun with them and not be doing live shows every day. But I will be pre-recording. So you will start to see on the channel some videos that will be in one of two states. They will either be showing when they will premiere, and so everybody can see them at the same time for the first time together, and others that you will see that are members first. And so this is one of the benefits of being a YouTube member. Suite level members will have an opportunity to watch these videos as soon as I publish them, if they want, or they can save them and wait for when I'm gone. If you do watch them right away, then you won't have new content when I'm gone. If you want to see it now, then you will be able to see it now. So suite level members will get some early access to some of those. One of the things that I have already up in that state is all of Geno Smith's game-winning drives. I have a video I did that will walk you through every play of every game-winning drive last season for Geno, and not just Geno, but the rest of the team. So some good stuff in there, and I'll be doing some more of that as we go. So keep an eye out for those and be aware that that's coming. If you haven't already, please give the show a like and click subscribe. I really, really appreciate it, and it helps other people find what we're doing here and building this community that I think is a really cool one so far. So, all right, let's get into it. So, one, I love the practicing in real jerseys. I love Geno's just always in the throwback, which is just so much better. It is such a better jersey, right? I mean, I'm fine with the Seahawks, jerseys as they are, but I don't know if I'll ever buy another jersey that's the normal standard jersey colors. I think I will only be buying throwback jerseys forever and for always. That blue is just so much better. It's so much better. All right. So some news that came out yesterday that at least caught my attention, I think worthy of conversation. I'll go through a few of these things. And one of them was this notion of a leadership team. And this came up in a couple of different places. And I'll have some sound for you about Mike Macdonald talking about this in a little bit. But we found out that Mike Macdonald has a 9-player leadership team. And there's some implication that Pete Carroll had something like this. I think he did. I don't think it was 9 players necessarily, but he did. And the one player that we know is on it is Laken Tomlinson. And that by itself was interesting. And I have some sound as well from Mike Macdonald talking about Laken Tomlinson. It was a really, really good press conference from Laken. If you didn't hear it, I encourage you to listen to the whole thing, especially him talking about his upbringing and his grandparents and getting pretty emotional about it. I'm not going to play all that part, but I think it's definitely worth getting to know a new Seahawk. But interesting, this guy is one of the last guys to be signed by the Seahawks, and he's on the 9-person leadership team. That's kind of crazy. I think that says something about the state of this team, how young it is, but also maybe that there's a bit of a void there in terms of veteran leadership, and that someone can come in that quickly and be a part of it. I think it also says something about Laken Tomlinson. If you hear the press conference, he is an impressive person, and when you hear him speak, you can imagine he's gonna command some respect in that locker room. But it begs the question, who are the other 8 players? And when I'm looking too far into this, as obviously I always will, but when Mike Macdonald was asked how many players are on this leadership team, he pretty quickly said 9. And so my guess, just a guess, my guess is they do 3 for offense, 3 for defense, and 3 for special teams. That's a guess. And so I kind of went through and did some more guesses about who do I think are the other people on this leadership team. And so I'd love to hear your guesses as well. And then there's one person that I'm guessing is not on this team. And what are the implications of that? So for defense, my guesses are Julian Love, Jaron Reed, and Uchenna Nwosu. And the thoughts there, the coaches have been pretty consistent in naming and praising Julian Love and his communication and his command of what's going on the defense. I also just think Julian Love is a leader by nature and someone who's going to be a professional. So, and he also, can play all 3 phases of the game in terms of, or all 3 phases of special teams if they need him, as well as multiple parts of the defense. Jaron Reed, I mean, if you've been listening to my show, there's been a lot of building evidence that he is just a key part of that defense. I'm going to talk about some new news about Jaron as well. I'm almost sure he would be on it. And then Nwosu, I just think of as a really key leader for this team. I could have guessed Leonard Williams would make sense to me as well, but maybe we'd want someone in the linebacker room. So maybe Jerome Baker would be on there. I don't know. But those are the guys on defense that I'm guessing. I see some folks, Detail Oriented says that he bets Rayshawn Jenkins is one. He says he's so well-spoken and just a natural leader. It wouldn't shock me either, for sure. On offense, we already have Laken Tomlinson, and so my guess are the other 2 are Tyler Lockett and Geno Smith. And a name that I'm guessing is not on there is DK Metcalf. And I've got some sound from him I'll play in a little bit as well, but I just wonder if DK is ever going to be a leader. And what does it say if the answer is no? I mean, if I asked you who are the best players on the Seahawks, DK Metcalf would be one of the first names that you'd mention. But if I asked most people, do you think DK is going to be a captain? They'd smirk or say no. If I said, do you think he's part of the leadership team? I think most people would say no. Don't know how I feel about that. Do not know how I feel about that. I also put John Radigan on this list because I think, given the departure of Nick Bellore, I'm guessing John Radigan is going to be one of the leaders on special teams, and I've got some sound about him from Mike Macdonald here. We'll talk about in a second, or listen to together in a second. But I think he's going to be a core part of special teams. I don't know. I can't imagine that they'd have a like Jason Myers or Dixon. Like, does anyone care what they think? I can't imagine either of them, but I think that maybe some other special teams, if Jarek Reed is injured and is just in his second season, so I don't think it would be him. But there might be other guys on special teams that are on this list. So curious who you think I got right on this list. Who do you think I got wrong? Who's missing? I'll be curious to hear a little bit more as we go on there. Next bit of news is Draymond Jones. And if I pull open, I should have had this already open, but I'm going to pull open an article that Brady Henderson put up there about Draymond Jones. And Brady Henderson talked about the fact that Draymond Jones is playing outside linebacker. And this is a thing that I've been talking to you guys all about for a while. And here it is. There we go. So here is what Brady Henderson wrote about Draymond Jones. Jones worked with the outside linebackers during position drills, then slid inside and lined up alongside Leonard Williams during one play in an 11-on-11 period when Seattle was in nickel. I'm gonna play some sound for you about Draymond Jones from Mike Macdonald later, but it is meaningful. It does matter that the position group that he is going through drills with are the outside linebackers. And what the implication there is that his primary role is going to be an edge player, not an interior player. And this other note from Brady, which is just great, that this is probably what makes Brady and good at what he does, is that he didn't exclusively play outside. There were moments where he slid inside, and that makes tons of sense in nickel situations, playing next to Leonard Williams and the games that they can play. So I really think we're getting more and more evidence that Draymond Jones is going to be an edge player, not an interior defensive lineman, at least in base downs. And again, my expectation is he's going to be getting quite a few snaps in the starting base defense. So important. We're learning along with, if you're paying attention, we're learning together. And that's one. I got another super chat here from Garth Knight. Thank you, Garth. He says, really appreciated the Ray Roberts stream the other morning. The in-depth O-line talk along with mental health talk was enlightening. Really appreciate it. I loved that conversation with Ray. I hope if you haven't heard it, honestly, it hasn't gotten as many views as I think it should. I mean, I think it's still a few thousand views. I think that one should be getting shared a bunch because Ray was fantastic. Great insights on the offensive line, on Scott Huff, on how he's coaching the offensive line, details that Ray's noticing, details on Olu Oluwatimi that other people don't have. We got inside there. We talked about Charles Cross some more. So there's a lot that we went into. And then Ray just had some really great thoughts on some of the mental health work he's been doing, on loneliness, other things. So I really recommend it and I appreciate Garth you shouting it out because I was proud of that episode. I think it was cool. All right. So that's the Draymond Jones news. The next bit, I mean, folks, this is not new news, but it is going to continue to be news until it is not. The linebacker situation is iffy. It is so iffy. I mean, we did find out from Mike Macdonald where Tyrell Dodson looked like maybe he was playing, like inching towards getting on the field in the last public or media, open to the media OTA. We now heard from Mike Macdonald, Dodson is not going to be on the field until training camp. Jerome Breaker, we already know, is not going to be on the field till training camp. So it's all John Radigan, all Patrick O'Connell as the starting linebackers. No change there. No Tyrese Knight sliding up or anything like that. It is those guys. And I'm going to play for you a little bit what I call coded praise from Mike Macdonald for John Radigan. And I'll tell you, I think a move's incoming. I really do. And maybe Jamal Adams is the most likely. Maybe if they can get him, they'll probably want him. But I did a whole show where I went over all the names. I didn't mention Jamal in that episode because I think everyone already knows Jamal, but I went through a bunch of other names that are possibilities for the Seahawks. And of note, some of the names that I mentioned are guys that play on teams that we talked about yesterday, who are on teams that John Schneider has connections with. The Tennessee Titans, the Washington Commanders, a few others that are on that list. So there may be a move to be made at the linebacker position. Maybe they bring in a free agent vet. I mean, they're bringing in Robbie Chosen, formerly Robbie Anderson, at receiver. So they're looking at receivers where they're already deep. I don't know. Maybe they just have zero interest in these free agent linebackers, the Zach Cunninghams, the Shaq Leonards, the other guys that are out there. But as of now, this linebacker room is not looking good. Not looking good. Next bit of news. The right side of that offensive line remains an open question. The George Fant did not practice yesterday, or at least I think he might have been absent. And so let me actually look up. There's a list of the guys. I think Bob Condotta had the list of guys that did not practice yesterday. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Maybe not. But in any event, Bob Condotta mentioned that at the end of practice, Raekwon O'Neal was playing with the starters on the offensive line. So you had Raekwon O'Neal playing next to McClendon Curtis with the ones on the right side of that offensive line, which, not ideal. Not ideal. And I think is a question mark about what's going to happen. It's also just worth knowing that those guys, it's not Mike Jarrell, it's not Garrett Greenfield, it's not any of these young guys getting chances at that first string spot. It is still very much these guys that were on the team last year. So, I mean, Abe Lucas is still not there. We knew that's the case. We did see some video yesterday from his trainer, Abe Lucas, continuing to work out. And with no George Fant, you had Raekwon O'Neal. So that was, nothing huge, but something that is so important for this team, and something that I'll be watching really closely as things progress. Another super chat. This one from Detail Oriented. Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, Brian, I want to just say thanks for the last episode on the Albert Breer article. I know it's early to say this, but I think Mike Macdonald could end up being our best coach ever, even topping Pete Carroll. Well, that would be awesome. That would mean he's lifted at least one trophy and hopefully more than one. And you know, I don't know if there's anyone more excited about this coaching change than I am. You know, as I said yesterday, I think it's the biggest offseason move in the NFL. And I don't expect anyone outside of Seattle to even recognize that, but that's the way I see it. And this is a huge experiment. I'm really hopeful that what we're going to look back on in a couple of years is, oh my God, how much coaching talent did we have in one place? Mike Macdonald, Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff, Frisman Jackson, Kennedy Polamalu, Leslie Frazier. I think that we're going to look back and say, wow, there was some serious talent in the coaching staff there. And frankly, we haven't said that for a long time. So really, really appreciate the super chat and agree. I'm excited. All right. Next bit of news. Brady Henderson broke this yesterday. Mr. Jarran Reed gets a contract bump. And it's nothing huge, but it is notable. The Seahawks did not have to do this. And I'm going to read to you what Brady wrote so that you have some more detail here. He says, the Seahawks tweaked Jarran Reed's contract per a source that Brady has on the team. They essentially took $530,000 he could have made via incentives and made it part of his base salary. The max value of the deal remains the same, and it's all non-guaranteed. So he does say that it appears that this actually increased Jarran Reed's cap number from 6.34 to 6.47. So this was not a move to clear cap. And the Seahawks are very close. They're like 1.1 million up against the cap. So they could use some reasons to clear the cap. This was not a cap clearing move. This was essentially, from what it seems like, a reward for a player that was a big part of the team last year, played a ton of snaps, and two, a recognition that he's a really key part of this team this year, and that they wanted to take what was an incentive and move it to base salary. He still does have some in-game bonuses and some incentives that are tied to different performance bars. So the $370,000 that are in incentives are all tied to sacks. He would make $185,000 with 8 sacks, or $370,000 with 10 or more. So that would be incentive pay based off of making some bigger impact. For folks that don't remember, he had 7 sacks last year. So 8 or 10 is in range, but we will see. And if you heard Mike Morris said he thinks that Jarran Reed is the player most set up for success with this new scheme, because of how smart he is and because of the way that Mike Macdonald plans to use him. So good news for Jarran Reed. Another bit of news that came out, this has been covered, like I would say over covered in 24 hours. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this because I think that, it's news. I definitely was interested about it, but the Seahawks, I'll tell you what it is. And if you're listening and not seeing what's on the screen here, the Seahawks will hold a joint practice with the Tennessee Titans the week of their preseason match when they travel to Nashville. So it's cool. We'll hear some comments from Mike Macdonald about this. I think fans and media are making a much bigger deal of this than I will, for what it's worth. I think I'm a fan of joint practices. I think they're actually more useful than preseason games because you get starters getting reps in these, because you get to actually control the situation and set up certain scenarios. And you get to break up the monotony of preseason where you are just going up against the same guys every single day and you're going up against the same schemes every single day. There are some teams like the Rams are doing, I think, 4 joint practices. 2 of them are with the Chargers. I actually found that interesting. Not surprising. Obviously, the Chargers are both with the Rams in LA, so that makes some sense. But if I'm Sean McVay and I know Mike Macdonald is going to be up in Seattle, I have to imagine that every additional look I can get at a Mike Macdonald type defensive scheme, the better. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sean McVay is kind of doing some Mike Macdonald scouting by going up against Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So, yeah, we'll see about that. We'll see about what happens there. But yeah, I think it's good news. I'm happy they're doing this. I'm happy that, for whatever reason, Pete Carroll was not into these. I'd also just say it's a little harder for Seattle than a lot of these teams that do it because they're not in the same city or the same close vicinity. They're not going to do a joint practice with the 49ers. I can tell you that much. And, maybe they'd go to Denver, but there's not a lot of places that are close by. Southeast, East Coast, these teams are all right around each other. So it's not a big deal to hold a joint practice. For Seattle, you're paying for travel. It's a meaningful move. So I think it's smart to kind of tie it to the preseason games. And I'm guessing that's how it's going to work going forward, where you're not actually paying more for travel. You're paying a little bit more for hotel, for the stay. But if you don't think finances play a role in this decision, you're crazy, because it absolutely does. It absolutely does. Well, look at that. We have a 49ers fan in here. I'm going to just delete comment for now, but just know I have a very, very quick ban trigger finger, especially for 49ers fans. But you are welcome here as long as you're not a dick, which is, I know, very, very hard for 49ers fans. It's not a normal state of being. It's hard. It's a lot of bitterness builds up after 30 years of not winning a ring. So that's the thought on joint practices. We'll hear a little bit more about that from Mike Macdonald in a bit. So that's that. By the way, this is a picture. Does anybody know what this is a picture of? If you are a suite level member, you may know what this is a picture of, because this shows up in the video that I made about game-winning drives. This is not actually a game-winning drive, but I included this drive in my film study, highlight reel, whatever you want to call it. That's up now for suite level members to see. And for everyone else that's not a suite level member, you will be able to watch it on the 22nd while I'm away. But this was a pretty amazing play that gave the Seahawks the lead in the fourth quarter in Tennessee last year. All right. That is the news, but now we're going to do a little listening to some different players. And for this part, I am going to play sound, and I will remind people again that the sound is as cranked up as I can make it. So you may feel like you can't hear it that well. This is a reminder that if you want the best quality sound, you want to be a patron. Patreon.com/hawkblogger gets you all of the audio versions of this podcast, where I boost all the audio, I equalize it so nothing's I'm not louder or someone else isn't quieter or whatever, and kind of sweeten it so it just sounds as good as possible. Plus, It's ad-free. You don't have to listen to any ads, and you can take it while you're on the road or walking, and you don't have to have YouTube up and playing. You can just have your phone not burning battery power. So patreon.com/hawkblogger. Plus, you get access to the Slack channel where everyone's talking about Seahawks all the time, as well as the Mariners, who won again yesterday and are a glorious 6.5 games up in the AL West. Go Mariners, Goms, as they say. So, yeah, patreon.com/hawkblogger. It's a great deal and a great way to support what we're doing with the show. All right. First bit of sound, I'm going to play some sounds from DK Metcalf. And this first sound, I'm going to play it, and then we're going to talk about it. This is, I think the question was like, what do you think of this offense? And DK mentions a little bit about his attendance and the implications there. Here you go. Hopefully you guys let me know if you cannot hear this for any reason.
I've only been here a couple of days throughout the off season, but from the days I've been here, I like Coach Grubb, his motivation, how every day he's strictly the same person. He's always motivating us to be our best selves. So that's one thing
So if you couldn't hear it for whatever reason, that was DK Metcalf saying that he's only been here for a few days during the offseason. And I'm going to play another sound before I give you commentary later on. This is later on in the press conference when asked about how he would feel if the NFL went to a situation where they had a shorter or a longer off season and then a longer training camp period. Like they kind of a shorter training camp because it's hard to describe. Basically, if the Players Association proposal where they were going to extend the off season and then they were going to have a shorter, like condensed training camp. And here was DK Metcalf's response to that.
like I said, man, it's the off season's voluntary. So if I have an off season for 6 months, I'm taking all 6 months.
That was DK saying, if the off season is 6 months, I'm taking all 6 months. It's voluntary. So on one hand, I mean, I get it. I mean, these guys they shouldn't have to do more than they have to do. They put a lot on their bodies, and it can be philosophical about, hey, like I'm going to give myself all the rest and rejuvenation, and then I'm going to torture myself with the physical hits I'm going to take and be all about it when I'm doing it. But that's not really my impression there. It's just another kind of indication that DK is not the guy that's going to be on a 9-person leadership team. He's not the guy that's going to lead by example, be there for every voluntary, help other guys out. Even if he doesn't need it, being there implies it helps, could be something that helps someone else. It could help a defender develop, having to go up against him. And so I don't love it. I don't love it that he is pretty flippant about this. Like, I'm going to be there for when I need to be there. And if it's voluntary, I'm probably not going to be there. I'm not going to make a huge deal of it, but I got to say, I don't think it's a great look for DK that he is so flippant about voluntary work. This next bit from DK Metcalf is about the fact that he was asked what he thinks about this offense could make it special. And there's a few things that stood out to me on this quote.
with the weapons that we have on offense. The O line. We brought in Lakin. George Fan is back. We still got the two-headed monster with Ken and Zach in the backfield. Noah. We brought in Farrell Brown from the Patriots, and then Meadlock, Jackson, Bobo, Derek. A laundry list of receivers that have great attributes to add to this offense.
So what stood out to me about the quote there from DK Metcalf, a few things. One, he went over a lot of names. He talked about bringing in vets on the offensive line. So he went to Lakin Tomlinson. He talked about George Fant. And I buy that for what it's worth. And then he talked about Farrell Brown. And he talked about when he went to the receivers, he went, himself, Lockett, JSN, Bobo, and then he said Derek Young. I bet you almost nobody caught that, but I'm paying attention to these things. I'm paying attention because there are a lot of receivers that you could mention. You could mention Eskridge. You could mention Laviska Shenault. You could mention Aesop Winston. You could mention, at this time of the year, last year, they were already mentioning Jake Bobo. So maybe if Hayden Hatton was blowing up at practice, maybe he would get mentions. But he mentioned Derek Young. And I think Derek Young is a sneaky player on this team. He's certainly, he's going to be on the special teams. He's a key part of that special teams unit. I think that he offers things as a runner that the Seahawks have not really featured before. And people that don't remember, he played in almost like a wing T offense in college where he played running back essentially as a receiver in a lot of different plays. And he had a decent rookie year. He was injured most of last year, but I think that that's a guy that's worth noticing. I do think that it's also interesting. He named all those players and about what makes this offense special. He didn't mention Geno. And I don't know that there's any reason to look into that. But I think it's pretty unusual for a player like the best receiver on a team being asked about what makes the offense special and to not name his quarterback. So I don't know. Maybe I'm over looking at, but that at least caught my attention. I'll be listening to see if DK is effusive about Geno later. He did talk about Geno a little bit later, but it wasn't necessarily effusive. It was just kind of like Geno's learning his offense. He's stepping up as a leader, that kind of stuff. All right. Next comment here was the first comment we've heard about his new position coach. And if you know anything about DK, you know that Sanjay Lal was a big influence on him. And so this was his first question here. I think it's worth noting that that DK has only been there for a few practices. So that means he's only got a little bit of time with this guy. But here's his first comments on Frisman Jackson.
I think he's different with his approach. Sanjay was very technical. Nate was very technical. He's technical to a certain extent, but he's really trying to learn the plays along with us. With this offense. So really haven't had a chance to see how he coaches out there. On the field, but looking forward to it. He seems like he knows exactly what he's talking about with releases and route stems and everything. So it'll be interesting to see once the season gets started.
That's a pretty interesting set of comments. He mentioned Nate Carroll and Sanjay Lal and both being very technical and was juxtaposing Frisman Jackson with those guys. And he said he's technical to a certain extent. So I don't know. I mean, generally, I think the read there is he's not that technical, or at least he's less technical. So than those other guys. So he's not working on technique as much, or at least from DK's perspective. And then he said that he's learning the offense along with the rest of them. And I don't know if that means that he's not able to offer additional input for the receivers that normally somebody that was really well steeped in the offense could, or it's just an acknowledgement that this is a offensive staff that's coming together that hasn't been together, and they don't know Grubb's offense. Kennedy Polamalu was new too, and so this group is kind of getting to know this stuff together. I just thought it was kind of interesting that he mentioned that Frisman Jackson is still learning the offense. There was a quote a little bit later about DK about the wide receiver contracts that have been out there and what's his take on this.
My pops told me growing up, never pocket watch. So, congratulations to all the receivers out there and everybody getting paid. But I don't pay attention. Can't.
Oh, I think that's good to hear and for him to say. I think that doesn't really. There's people I saw really looking into this, saying, "Oh, this might mean that DK takes a little bit less of a deal with the Seahawks next year." I don't see that at all, at all, not for a second. Not pocket watching is great. Like, why spend time worrying about other people? His agents 100% pocket watch, folks. Like, they do. That's their job, and DK focusing on himself is really what that's about. And DK, he's going to go out there and try to do as best as he possibly can. And if, he does what he thinks he's going to do and he's 28 next year, whatever it is, he's going to be looking for top of the market kind of money. He just will be. So I don't think there's any reason to think DK Metcalf will take a cheaper deal with the Seahawks, but I think that's the right answer for where he is right now. I mean, it would be more concerning if he was like, hey, yeah, those guys aren't as good as me and I should be getting paid more. I'm glad that's not the case, but I wouldn't look more into it than that. All right, so those were the comments from DK that stood out. Let's talk a little bit about Mike Macdonald and some of his comments. This first one I'm going to play is about joint practices and his thoughts on that.
Well, there's a lot to like about it. I mean, you're with a team that, you respect their operation. We know a lot of the coaches over there, how they operate. And really, it's an opportunity to kind of put it in a setting where you can control the tempos, control the drills, get some high intensity for the guys so they're ready to roll come the opener time. And it's just easier to a little bit control than in true game reps, and we're still working through who's going to play in the preseason and for how much. But it's a great opportunity if you do it the right way to get some really good competition in and sharpen each other and try to get ready for the regular season.
This is Mike Macdonald talking about joint practices and his first joint practice with the Titans. And you heard him talk about things that I mentioned earlier, which is you do get to control the scenarios. You get to control who's out there when you get to control a lot. You also get exposed to different schemes. And, he has connection to that Titans team with, I think it's Denard Wilson, who was a coach under Macdonald in Baltimore. So they have a connection there. And then obviously John Schneider, as I mentioned yesterday, through the Albert Breer article, has connection with the personnel head with Tennessee. So good quote there, just, him talking about what's going on there. And let's hear him talk about Laken Tomlinson next. I think there were some things that were a little bit telling about the way and the tone in which he talked about Laken Tomlinson. Again, keep in mind, this is a guy signed to a vet minimum that came in pretty late in the game. So here is Mike Macdonald talking about Laken Tomlinson.
It's a great signing. It's a great signing. I mean, he's going to be in a leadership team. Kind of hits you right between the eyes, communication wise, which is what we're asking for. Brings a a veteran presence to our offensive line, some poise, guys that's seen a lot of ball, been in a different lot of systems. So very excited about having Lakin on our O-line.
I mean, he said great signing twice, right? And Mike Macdonald so far is not a guy that just is effusive. He doesn't just throw praise at people because he's not Pete in that way, right? He's not going to just talk about everybody as if they're the best player ever. He seems pretty happy about Lakin Tomlinson being here. And if you will play a little Lakin Tomlinson sound, it's not hard to understand why. I mean, the guy is a pro and extremely well-spoken and someone that just you respect as soon as you hear him the first time. You're like, okay, yeah, this is a guy that I have respect for. And where we've been talking about there being like, who's going to be a potential competitor for Tomlinson at the left guard position? Are we just going to hand him this job? There probably will be some competition, but the reality is he's on the leadership team. Mike Macdonald's already talking about him this way. He's one of the only real veterans. Like George Fant isn't, knock on wood, isn't expected to start. He would be the only veteran on that line. And so I think there is a very low chance that Lakin Tomlinson will be anything but a starter at left guard for this team. So we can call it a camp battle, but I don't think it really is. I think that one's pretty set. Now, this next thing is Mike has then asked about how many guys are on his leadership team. And we'll hear a little bit about that.
How many guys are on your leadership team?
9.
What are you seeking out of them? What's the intent?
Yeah, it's an opportunity to just open the channels of communication and where we can bounce ideas off one another, and they can be a conduit to the locker room and from our message as coaches out to the rest of the team. And then if there's something going along with the team that we need to know about, we can have those conversations. So, I mean, that goes for the whole team, but it's just an opportunity to kind of shrink the sample size, so to speak, and, build that relationship. And then we kind of forward the message, throughout the whole building. So we got a great group.
Yeah, so that's just him talking about how they're looking at the leadership team. I don't think there's anything surprising there, but I think it's a solid model, and I think it's going to serve him well, especially as a young first-time coach, to stay really closely connected to what's going on with the locker room and hear from the players that he respects. Like, what are they hearing? What are they seeing? Because he's going to have to stay close to this thing in a way that he hasn't before. Next thing here from Mike Macdonald is about player-led culture. So this is something related to how important is it to have the culture kind of formed by the players?
I mean, it's incredibly important. I mean, you look at championship teams throughout any sport, I think most of them are player run, so if we can communicate the standard and all buy in and guys start kind of pushing that and holding each other accountable of what we expect on the field and in the locker room and as a team, then I think that's when you're really cooking with gas. And then we're not there yet, but I think we're on our way. And I really believe we got the right guys.
That's Mike Macdonald talking about player-led culture and a belief he's got, which is that you look at championship teams across any sport, they are player-led, and important for him, important to know that about him and what his perspective is, and that he wants to create a standard that is clear enough that his players can then carry it out, and that the players are holding each other accountable. And I think that's right. I think it's absolutely the right way as a leader to set up. It's not that different than Pete. And for people that are like, Mike Macdonald, so much different than Pete, I think this is a really important area where they are the same. Next bit I wanted to play was Mike Macdonald talking about John Radigan. And this one, you have to kind of read or listen between the lines. And if you could see Mike Macdonald's face, he has his thinking face when he's asked this question about the linebacker position.
Well, I think John's improved every day. So that's probably the highest compliment I can give him. I mean, it's just that's what we want from the rest of our team, of guys going out, taking the coaching, taking it to the field, taking the next step, and then keep rolling. So John's going to be an integral part of our team, and wherever it shakes out at the linebacker position, we'll see. But he's doing a great job for us on and off the field. It's going to be a big special teams player for us as well. But yeah, it was cool to see him make some plays today for sure.
So Mike Macdonald, he's got to tell, as far as I'm concerned, when he's asked a question that he doesn't really want to answer, or he doesn't have nice things necessarily to say, his first thought is not super positive. He gets that kind of big-eyed blank stare look. You could see the wheels turning. How am I going to answer this? And then he goes into this answer here about John Radigan, about the best thing I can say about him. And as he's saying that, he's shaking his head. There's a lot of tells body language wise with Mike Macdonald, but it's good. He's like, the best thing I can say, which that also from a language standpoint, I'm going to parse this stuff because I do this when I work. I pay attention to all these things that people say. It's served me very well over the years. I understand people pretty well, but his when you say the best I can say, meaning that it's really a reaction to, I don't have a lot of good things to say. So the best thing I can say is he's been improving every day. He's taking coaching. And then he follows up later, if you caught it, by saying, we'll see how this linebacker position will shake out. The implication there is he's not assuming John Radigan's going to be a big part of the linebacker situation. And I think it's also a sign that they might be making a move sooner rather than later at that position. So I don't think that was a particularly strong vote of confidence for John Radigan. Someone just wrote the chat, John Radigan is a football player who wears pads. Yes, it was kind of yes, it was kind of that level. And I mean, Radigan is a guy that I think is going to be a core special teams player. And I do believe that part of what he was saying, and that he's going to play an important role. I believed all of that. That came easily to Mike Macdonald to say those things. The other things about the linebacker spot, he was searching, if you're asking me. That's my read of his comments on John Radigan. Next comment is about DK. And this is in really good stark contrast to some of the things I was saying before about, DK not being there for voluntary, and that's not the best look. When Mike was asked about DK, here's what he had to say.
Attack those type of deals, but I think he's playing pretty well right now.
What have you got to know about DK Metcalf since you took this round?
He's a really good player. I mean, we knew it. I mean, he's a guy that you always had to account for. Anytime he steps on the field, like, you got to know where 14 is, and you can't let him wreck the game. So he wants to be really good. He wants to be the best, and he wants to be pushed. He wants to be coached hard, which you respect about him. And really, I mean, the way he practices is like really awesome. I mean, this guy practices extremely hard, does all the little things that you're asking to do. So it's a great example that he's setting for that room and really for our offense as a whole. So a lot of respect for DK, type of player he is, type of person he is. And I love seeing him out there, man, because he raises the whole level of our team when he's practicing for us.
Pretty strong praise for DK Metcalf. And I think that was, you see Mike's body language there. He's got so much respect for DK as a player. And the fact that he practices the way that he does when he is there, I think you've got a guy that Mike Macdonald just is very impressed by. And I think that's great. And I think that there's also potentially a little messaging coming through the media there of it's so important to the team when he's there to practice. So be there to practice. I think that's part of the message there. Whether or not DK, receives that or not is debatable. But I think it was great. It was great. And I think if Mike Macdonald, we saw how Pete Carroll struggled in his last year reaching DK Metcalf. We heard DK Metcalf being outright insubordinate about the penalties and how whether he was going to change anything in the way he plays. And kind of being dismissive of the things Pete Carroll was doing when he was showing the penalties and Tell the Truth Monday and that kind of stuff. And so I think it's great for Mike Macdonald to start in a place of deep respect for DK, loving having him on the team, loving how much he adds to the team, loving how he practices. That can only give them the best chance of forming a solid relationship, because DK also, was sad to see Pete Carroll go. I mean, they were close, even if he was insubordinate in how he spoke to the media at times last year, relative to Pete's messaging. So I think this is good news all around. And it was really, again, tell for Mike Macdonald. I mean, this was very easy for him. His eyes lit up. He smiled. He was like, he's like, this is a dude. This is one of the dudes on this team. And I think it was great to hear that. Last clip I'm going to play from Mike Macdonald is about Draymond Jones. And this is about how they plan to use Draymond Jones.
He's very much in the mix of that. I think you saw it today. We don't know the answers yet. We don't know how it's going to look, come beginning of the season and how it's going to progress throughout the whole year. But I think his skill set lends to trying to play a little matchup ball with him, or, setting another guy up, and he can do a lot of things. So we've talked about it, but we're really excited about Draymond. He was in great shape today, and he knew a lot of the stuff we were doing, even though he hadn't been in the building. So credit to him for staying up to speed.
So that was Mike Macdonald talking about Draymond Jones and basically saying that he's lining up all over the defense, and that a couple things that stood out to me were that he showed up in great shape, and that he showed up knowing the defense and knowing what to do. And I could tell from watching Mike Macdonald in that press conference, he was impressed by that. I mean, he would rather him be at the voluntary OTAs, guarantee you. But the fact that he was enough of a professional to come in ready to practice because he knew what to do was something that Mike Macdonald respects. And he also, one of the comments that's interesting is his how did he put it? That his characteristics lend itself to, being used at different places, and whether it's for him or setting other guys up. And so the implication there, I think, is twists, games, stunts, which Mike Macdonald does a lot in his pressure patterns. One guy pinning a lineman so another guy can twist around that guy and have access to the quarterback. So I think, Draymond Jones appears to be a pretty important puzzle piece, chess piece for Mike Macdonald in this defense. So those are some comments from Mike Macdonald. Let's hear a little bit from Laken Tomlinson. Now, I'm only going to play you one clip from Laken. I recommend you listen to the whole press conference, especially the latter half when he talks about his family and his upbringing and being from Jamaica and what it means to him. Some of his plans of how he wants to give back. All that was really, really good. But just in the interest of time, I'm going to play more of the football related stuff. And this was a comment when asked about working basically between two really young guys, Charles Cross on his left and Olu Olotimi on his right.
It's been great, to be honest. And those are two guys who've been here every day. They're busting their tails, and extremely respectful guys. They come up to me, ask me questions, how you feel on this, how you feel on that. And even just doing like the little stuff, like saying after these practices and just going through things that can happen in the game, certain scenarios. It's been great working with them. And I truly appreciate that from both those guys, because, building that chemistry, especially this time of the year, is extremely important for our offensive line room.
So that was Laken Tomlinson talking about Charles Cross and Olu Olotimi. in glowing terms, all the things you want to hear. They've been at every practice. They're staying after practice. They're having conversations about how to handle certain things. All good stuff. All good stuff. That part of the line, I think you got to feel hopeful about. And then the right side of the line, let's just hope Christian Haynes makes a really big jump and earns like a spots as with the starting unit would be great if that happens. And then let's just hope Abe Lucas is healthy, So, but that was Lake and Tomlinson talking about the guys that are next to him. And the last sound I'm going to play is from Boye Mafe. Boye, I got a couple clips from him, nothing too much. Boye is like super smart guy. I find that he is very, I don't know. There's not a lot of insight gained from what he says. There's a lot of cliches, a lot of kind of party line stuff. He says a lot of words, but doesn't say a lot of things that are meaningful. And I don't know if that's just a personality thing or if the PR team, like he really learned the PR stuff well and just knows to not say anything that's particularly meaningful. So that there's nothing negative that comes out of it. But I didn't find a lot of what he said to be super useful. The two clips I'm going to play are really about his role in this defense. This first one is about, are there any things different with this defense for how he plays?
I definitely feel as if right now my roles are, there's different opportunities. You're putting me in different positions. I'm seeing that I'm moving around on the field. So that's one thing I do like. And we can do that with anybody in the field. I like how we're doing the defense and how we're learning it in the standpoint of we're learning the whole defense.
So that was Boye Mafe talking about how they're moving him around different parts of the field and that they're learning the whole defense. So yeah, that's interesting. I don't know what that means because this next clip I'm going to play for you is him talking about, but he's still just an outside linebacker. I mean, that's his role.
I'm still an outside linebacker at the end of the day. I still got to rush the passer. I still got to do my job, play the run, set the edge. So at the standpoint of what am I doing, I'm still doing the same thing. So we just have the opportunity to learn new things and learn more and have a different role and bigger role in the defense.
I don't know what to make of that. So he's an outside linebacker. No surprise there. But he's moving around on the defense. So I guess my best guess is this is some of the pressure patterns where there might be situations where, he's standing up in the middle of the line as opposed to one edge of the line, maybe some disguises, things like that could be coming into play. But he's still essentially doing the same role, but maybe some different variations of it. Don't know. I mean, it's something to monitor. I think how they're going to use Boye Mafe, Draymond Jones, Uchenna Nwosu is one of the real things to watch for when we get into training camp, when we get to preseason and so forth. That's not even talking about Derek Hall and Darrell Taylor and all those guys, but yeah, and they've got pieces there. Just kind of curious how they're going to get the most out of them. You don't get the impression that they're doing things to feature Boye Mafe. You do get the sense that they're doing that for Draymond Jones. I think you're going to find that they're doing that for some of the other guys on the defensive line. But we'll see. We will see. Here we've got a super chat from Hawks fan Matt Man who says, do you know if the collective bargaining agreement allows the coaches to at least imply that it would be good to attend voluntary practice, especially with so much newness? Oh, there is nothing in the CBA that would keep the coaches from encouraging players to attend, from celebrating the players that are attending, from talking about how much was learned. They can absolutely do whatever they want there. But end of the day, the players are going to just make that decision for themselves. And, we talked about DK in this show, but as we heard, Draymond Jones wasn't there for a lot of these things, and he came in ready and prepared. DK came in ready. He had been doing his study and was prepared. So he was a professional. There's nothing wrong with that. Leonard Williams, hasn't been there for all of it. Like, there's the guys that just aren't all there. But when you get to the mandatory, we didn't hear anything about players other than an excused absence for Michael Dixon, who's getting married. Congratulations to Big Dixon Energy. And so that's the best, is like the mandatory stuff. People are here. They're supposed to be. Aaron Rodgers, for all his bluster about this, that, and the other, he was an unexcused absence from the mandatory camp for the Jets. And the other guy for them, Hassan Reddick, that they traded for, who wants a new contract, unexcused absence. Those are the things that have bigger issues. But yeah, I mean, if you heard Mike Morris, I didn't play all this sound when I did the cut-ups of Ian Furness's interview with him, but he was pretty clear, like, it really matters right now for the defense to be there, to be learning this stuff, because it's a sophisticated defense and it takes some getting used to. And so, Mike Morris is not a guy that can be a big voice in the locker room, having played one game and not proven himself yet. But he also was pretty open about the fact that it does matter for people to be there. And I buy that. How could it not? How could it not? So that was a run through the Seahawks OTA mandatory minicamp day 1. And there's some more stuff to cover, and we'll do that because we have other days coming. But don't forget, tonight at 6:00 Pacific time, Maura Dooley will be on the show with Jeff Simmons, Dana O'Gorman, and myself, talking about more of what she's noticed at camp, anything that she can share to embarrass Mike Salk, and Brock Heward will be welcome as well. But really looking forward to that conversation at 6 p.m. Pacific time. If you're a patron, I will post in the chat soon the thread for you to ask questions. So we'll take patron questions, and looking forward to that. You can ask questions of us as a patron, patreon.com/hawkblogger. Sign up right now. Get the audio version of this podcast ad-free, and other great benefits like the Slack channel and asking questions of the Real Hawk Talk crew every week. Also, appreciate all the YouTube members here, all the super chats today. Really, really appreciate the support. And as I mentioned, YouTube members are going to be getting some previews of extra content I'm going to be creating for when I am gone on vacation a week from Friday. Yeah, so we should have more from Seahawks minicamp tomorrow. Until then, I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, everybody.